We have our first call here coming from Cass, who is calling in from Canada. Cass, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's going on?
Hey, nothing much. How are you guys?
Doing
Great. How are you?
solid. How can we help you?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to talk about the topic of like death and the idea of afterlife, just because, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about my whole life, growing up very religious, and especially the past few months since my mom passed away. And it's just like, it's a great idea to think about an afterlife, but it's also just not something I have enough evidence to believe in. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious about what you guys think about it, and like kind of where you guys come from an atheist standpoint.
Yeah, Richard, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, kind of. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I myself have lost both of my parents and all of my grandparents. So yeah, I've been through the kind of the death thing a little bit myself as well. I've never been religious, so have never had that kind of perspective of coming out of religion, or kind of having that difference of opinion between being a religious person and believing in an afterlife, and not being a religious person and not believing in it, but still having those kind of remnants of belief to it. It's interesting for me, the kind of the perspective from that angle. From me personally, I've never believed in an afterlife. I've studied religion from lots of different cultures. There are lots of different beliefs about the afterlife, and lots of different ways of dealing with both an afterlife and the kind of death itself. And some of them are entirely climate related, which I think is really, really interesting. You know how you dispose of bodies in the Himalaya, where you're high up and everything's frozen. You can't bury bodies up there. Is entirely different to how you would do it in a kind of temperate climate, and that all plays in to kind of belief about the afterlife as well. There's lots of ways of looking at it. For me personally, it's interesting to look at it kind of academically, but there's an emotional aspect to it as well. And I'm interested in your kind of when you said you don't have evidence for it, because this kind of suggested to me that there's this internal struggle going on where you've got a remnant of belief, and although you kind of understand from the kind of from the logical point of view that there's no good reason to believe it, that you might still be clinging to a little bit of your former belief about an afterlife. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I feel like you really like nailed the whatever that term is. Sorry, I'm a little
hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I think in such situations, it's we could talk about well, there's no good reason to believe it till the cows come home, and it will make no difference. It's you're still going to be in a process of grieving, and you've got to kind of work through that, and it's going to be a personal thing. I think the reason I suggested these different cultures and things is for me the kind of the best kind of suggestion I've got for you, because you're still clinging to a particular view from a particular tradition on an afterlife, is go and kind of have a look at all the different afterlives. So rather than trying to tell yourself, well, it makes no sense to believe in an afterlife because there's no evidence for it, just go and look at how many different kinds of beliefs there are about afterlives. And I think that will internally give you an understanding, rather than trying to reason your way out of it, which doesn't always work, especially when you've got a huge emotional kind of baggage to go with that. Rather than trying to reason your way out of it, just kind of look at all the different ideas there are about it across the board, and I think that will be more helpful than somebody saying to you, well, you've just got to think your way out of it, because it doesn't make sense to believe in it. Dan?
No, I think what you're saying is true. So I was a former Christian. I've been a non-believer for over half a decade now. I don't know how long it's been, a little over half a decade. So I think, Cass, if most of us were honest with ourselves, especially those of us who were former Christians, we recognize that a lot of people, one of the reasons why they believe is because they think some philosophical proposition is true, or they think, oh, this historical evidence or the scientific evidence is really great and pointing towards a God belief. They want to believe in an afterlife. Like, I think an afterlife is a core part of it. And that's not just for Christians, by the way. That's for most of human history, right? Like, how many religions talk about what happens after death, right? I think it's most of them. Not all of them, certainly, but there's a lot of them that do. And that's because there is something about the human psychology that wants to keep going, right? And wants to be able to see our loved ones after they pass. That says, oh, well, they're okay. They're just in a different place than they are now. But the truth is, as of course you recognize, is that our consciousness is probably tied towards our physical beings, right? And so when our physical self expires, so does everything else about us. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. It's a pill that most people don't want to swallow. So we kind of suppress that a little bit. And the fact that you're having this sort of dissonance, even though like you don't believe in a bunch of other stuff, points to how hard it is to dissuade yourself of this kind of belief. It really is sort of a psychological phenomenon, but it's also a thing that you just have to deal with like everybody else, right? Like, we all kind of have to grieve. We all kind of have to go through with this. In my opinion, though, it's more honest to be able to say, well, this person was with us now and now isn't, and we can move on with our lives and recognize the impact that they've had in our lives. It makes our relationships with people, in my opinion, even more meaningful. Because if I say, oh, well, I know my grandmother's sick right now, but I'm not going to visit her. I'm just going to wait till the afterlife comes and maybe I'll see her then. I mean, that's a very extreme example, but we do kind of not take as much stock into human life in that regard. I mean, there's a lot of people that do really think, well, there's the bad things happening now, but people are going to a better place. It is how like awful things like war are justified in some people's minds. So in one sense, it's terrible because we don't get to see the people that we love anymore. But in another sense, it does give us a sense of beauty because it lets us know that the relationships and impacts that people had in our lives were real and we're lost. And I think it's that loss that sometimes gives us the value that they had in the first place. I don't know, just a perspective, but there's a million answers to this question. The only one that's going to work for you is the one that works for you. And that's something you got to figure out for yourself. But hopefully that's helpful, Cass. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just, it's kind of like the hard part for me is that it's almost like I'm still kind of holding on to like a little bit of hope that there's an afterlife. Like, I'm okay with like the idea that like you die and that's it. Like, there's nothing else. I'm okay with that idea, but there's still that just like that little piece of me that's just like, well, I guess it would be a nice thing if there was something after, like something that we cannot imagine or we don't know. You know, it's just kind of like the idea of it is still kind of like nice to think about. And it's just, it's hard because it's like, is that helpful for me or is that making it worse? Like, is it easier for me to just throw out every hope and just move on as if, you know, there's nothing that's going to happen after? Or is it helpful for me to at least hold on to some hope because maybe that'll give me some motivation or happiness? Like, I don't know where to kind of like draw that line because obviously, like how you guys said too, like some people who are really religious, they kind of like, they believe so much in an afterlife that they don't, you know, live this life to the fullest because they just think, okay, I'll see you in the next life and whatever. So it's like, I don't want to live that way, but I also kind of, it's almost like I like the hope that, you know, maybe there is something more to the life that we're living now. But I also just don't want to completely not live the life I have now at the same time. So it's kind of just like drawing a balance.
Yeah. The fact that you're cognizant of that, I think, is a good sign. Right, because it's like you understand
Mhm.
that, yeah, that's an excuse people use not to like take care of their own health, right? I've definitely heard that from people. They just say, "Well, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. This
absolutely.
life is temporary," right? You understand that that's BS. You understand that's something people say
Yeah.
to make themselves feel better. That's good. I think that's the healthiest place you can be. If the thought that an afterlife at least gives you some kind of peace, or at least maybe the fact that, I mean, because like we don't know, honestly, right? Like we don't know. There very much could be. I think it's very unlikely, but that's one of those questions where it's like, yeah, I just don't think it's true, but I can never possibly 100% know for sure. I just wouldn't know what that would mean. I guess where I'm getting at here is a loose kind of belief like that is going to be way less problematic than one that's sort of stitched into a hierarchy of other beliefs. And what I'm really talking about here is Christianity, right? Because I'm assuming you come from a Christian
Yeah.
background, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
Christian sort of,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I grew up like
There's
very
implications.
fundamental, like Pentecostal um
Yeah,
religion. That's kind of
there's a
I grew up,
there's
yeah.
there's a whole lot of implications that come with like that Christian sort of understanding of the afterlife, and I don't think that's where your brain is at, right? And I'm just anticipating the comment section here because I don't want them to be like, "Oh, you shouldn't tell people to believe in delusions." I'm not. It's natural to think that there could be an afterlife. I say it's natural because billions of people believe it. Like that's just the thing. That's part of humanity. Whether or not we can control that, or whether or not we find it convincing, that's going to be up to people's psychology, people's understanding of evidence, people's understanding of philosophy, people's understanding of life. So I say, if it's helpful for you and it's not going to be a bother in any other sense of your life, yeah, have hope. But I also strongly suggest, which you already do, understanding and being cognizant of the fact that this probably is the only life we have, and so the relationships you have with people and the things for yourself, like, you should be building and investing it for yourself in, right? Like, you shouldn't just be like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna donate all of my life to doing this thing for other people because I can't, that and I'll get treasures in heaven if I do this," right? Like,
Mhm.
that's not gonna be helpful for you. But if you say, "Hey, I'm gonna give my time for people because I wanna help other people out, it makes me feel good, and also, I think that's one of the best things a human being can do." I mean, that's doing the same thing, but with a different perspective, right? It really is about that perspective, like how healthy of a perspective that is. And I think what you're describing sounds natural and totally fine, honestly. I don't know. What do you think,
Mhm.
Richard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I just want to say a couple of things on the kind of hope thing.
Yeah.
First of all, I would I would absolutely love there to be a place where I could be reunited with, my loved ones who have passed on. I think it'd be brilliant. I kind of hope that's the case as well. Without having any, I've never been religious. I've ever never held that belief, but it is a nice idea. And if you can use that as a and I think that as well, even though I've never believed in it, I still I can think about it and say to myself that would be a really really great thing without having any belief that it is true or that it will happen whatsoever. You can still use it as a tool to kind of help you face this emotional stress you're going through. I still think about that. My father died 11 years ago, and I still think about that. My mum's died at the start of last year, and I still think, wouldn't it be nice if there was a place where we could be together again with the full kind of acceptance that there isn't? And I think it's, as Dan said, it's a perfectly natural thing to do. I think it's also worth kind of noting that religions have and do exploit this hope tremendously. And, I think I can't speak for all of them. I'm not saying that they're all like utterly dishonest because I don't think they are all utterly dishonest. But there are some religions and certainly some kind of schools of religion, certain churches, certain preachers, certain pastors that will exploit this and use this to take advantage of people. And being aware that this is a natural thing that people go through, and be aware that people do use this as an exploitative tool
Yeah.
And I think that's very important just to keep in the back of your mind as well. But yeah, I'm on the same, absolutely on the same page as Dan with this. You know, it's a natural part of the grieving process, and there is no harm in it. There is no harm in having those thoughts. Wouldn't it be nice if I could be with my loved ones again?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all we have to say on this, Cass. Hopefully that was helpful. Any other comments before we let you go?
No, that was very helpful. It's helpful to, you know, talk about it with like-minded people. I just like had this fear that, you know, if I think this way, like, am I like progressing in like logical thinking, or am I like being held back by like this fundamental belief that like I've been taught my whole life? So
Yeah.
it's helpful to know that like you guys too, as atheists and logical thinkers, like also, you know, have a hope, because it would be nice, you know.
100%. Cass, you have
yeah,
my
so
permission
it's
to
like,
be irrational on this belief.
Yeah.
Okay, here I have granted you high authority from the atheist community of Austin on high,
Okay.
and I've said yes, you're allowed to have this because you're a human being and you deserve dignity and respect and to be able to grieve for your loved ones. Yeah, 100%. So if that's what you're looking for, I'll give that to you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, of course.
Very helpful.
Of course. Thank you for calling in, Cass. What a nice call. Of course, circumstances not being nice, but just like I like this perspective of, hey, I think of myself as a logical thinker, and I want to think logically about this. Is it okay that I'm not thinking logically about this? Like,
I think it's brilliant. I think
Yeah.
there's so many people kind of in our community who try and kind of make Vulcans out of themselves and
Yeah.
disassociate themselves from emotion, and you can't do that. We
Yeah.
are emotional creatures, and we can understand logic and we can understand kind of skepticism in practice, but we are still emotional and we've still got that aspect of ourselves to deal with. And it's great to keep a sight on ourselves as
Yeah.
well as talking to other people about skepticism. We need to view it internally as well.
This is a problem that the atheist community faces at large. They really do think of a lot of people as like Vulcans, and this idea of like, oh, am I allowed to be irrational about this? Like, it's almost like there's going to be consequences if you are, and beliefs are important, right? I'm not saying like beliefs don't have consequences. They certainly do. But there's nothing about, at least from what Cass is describing about their situation, in saying, oh, this is going to lead to something that's problematic, right? They're not saying, oh, I think there might be hope for heaven, so I'm going to donate all my money to this psychic who can tell me about talking to my mother through phenomenon and stuff. It's nothing like that. It's more just like, I hope I get to see this person again. And if that's the extent of it, yeah, why would I take that away from somebody? Why? Because I think I'm better than them, and I think, oh no, actually, you're never gonna see this person again. I mean, how shitty is that? Right? There's no reason for that. So
I don't think in itself it's an illogical viewpoint anyway, having
Yeah.
that hope. You're not saying you think it's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
You just want to see someone you love and who's had a great amount of importance in your life again. I think that's absolutely acceptable.
Yeah, it's true.